Though the idea of launching a console with only two games sounds like a terrible idea, in the case of the N64, it ended up not mattering because Super Mario 64 was just that good. It was a case study in quality over quantity, and by the time people had had their fill of Super Mario 64, more games had hit the market. Really, the only negative consequence of this choice was that the other launch title for the N64 ended up being overlooked. Pilotwings 64 is the sequel to the SNES launch title, Pilotwings. The original Pilotwings was basically a tech demo for the SNES's Mode 7 graphics, and though it was an impressive showcase of the console's technical capabilities, as a game, it paled in comparison to F-Zero. So why is it that a follow-up for the N64 was put into production so quickly? Well, if I had to guess, it was because Pilotwings basically operated in a 3D space from the get-go, so it made sense to do so. It simply required less creative thinking for this to take shape than it did Super Mario 64. This is also probably why Pilotwings 64 got through production before Nintendo put a halt on everything to focus on Super Mario 64, hence why Nintendo decided to go ahead and release it at launch. In hindsight though, it probably would have been smarter to wait a little bit because while Pilotwings 64 certainly isn't a bad game, it pales in comparison to Super Mario 64, and given the proximity of their releases, it didn't have much of a chance to leave an impact. Much like the original game, in Pilotwings 64, you take the role of one of 6 pilots attempting to get their license to operate a variety of aircraft. There isn't much to talk about here apart from contests, and just like the SNES game, I kinda wish there was more to it. I think a Top Gun or stunt pilot kind of school would have made it a little more interesting, but hey, whatever. It's also interesting to note that the character Lark was designed to resemble the character Nestor from the Nintendo Power comics. Might explain why the overall art style is so oddball. The characters are rendered in this very classic Chupo style, and sadly it doesn't translate that well to 3D. Thus, the characters look like a pile of noodles with melons for heads. That being said, the game does impress with its big and open environments, which are surprisingly varied, but the overall picture quality and performance leave something to be desired. I especially hated any mission that took place at night or in the dark because of how hard it was to see what you were doing. The soundtrack isn't anything to write home about either. As for the gameplay, it's also not too far off from the SNES game. You pick one of the pilots and then partake in a series of tests where you operate one of the 3 aircraft. The selection of craft includes a glider, jetpack, and gyrocopter, and the tests range from stuff you would expect like flying through greens and performing some aerobatics, through to more interesting tests such as taking pictures in midair, attempting to reach a certain altitude, or shooting down targets. Most of these tests might come off as a little basic, but the thing about Pilotwings 64 is that the challenge doesn't really come from the complex mission structure, but rather the complex controls of the aircraft in question. Each of the craft has a unique form of handling that you need to come to terms with if you want to conquer the game's challenges. Though it might sound a little boring, it actually is a pretty fun game. It's addicting to try and get a handle on how to operate these vehicles, and try the test again and again in order to maximize your score. There is also some fun side stuff like skydiving, the human cannonball, and a bird suit that allows you to freely fly around the various levels. All that being said, there are still some shortcomings. Though the combination of simple mission structure and complex controls make for an engaging game, it does mean that there is a bit of a learning curve. It takes a lot of time to get familiar with flying, maneuvering, and landing, and I can't really say it's that rewarding to master it all. All you really get for your efforts is a higher score, and it can feel just a little repetitive, especially if you find yourself trying again and again and again to get a perfect score. It also doesn't last too long either. It only took me a few sittings to finish every test, and though there is some replay value in going back and trying to get gold in every event, I didn't have much of a desire to do so. Not that that's a big issue because Pilotwings 64 airs on the cheaper side of N64 games. Though it's less common than Super Mario 64, it goes for significantly less. Due to being sort of a sister release to Super Mario 64, Pilotwings 64 was overlooked in its day. Though the game will receive a positive reception from fans and critics, a basic 3D flying simulator simply didn't impress in the same manner an open-ended 3D platformer did. Most people bought the N64 for Super Mario 64 and not Pilotwings 64, and by the time people were ready to pick up a new game for the console, there was more to choose from. Now, it's not to say that Pilotwings 64 wasn't successful. Over the course of the N64's life cycle, it would sell over 1 million copies, but it's not a game that gets talked about at length when people bring up the console. There also wouldn't be another Pilotwings game until Pilotwings Resort launched in 2011. Still, Pilotwings 64 retains something of a cult following amongst N64 players, and for good reason, because it is a decent enough game. However, as far as flight games on the N64 go, well, I have a few more down the way that I recommend over this any day of the week.